So today's webinar is about, a bunch of different things. It's about lateraling into a law firm, if that's something that you're interested in doing as a lateral attorney. It's also about the things that you need to do as a law student or a, practicing attorney to go into firms, not just top firms, but pretty much any law firm. And I'm going to talk to you today about the choices that you have the option of making that can drastically influence the direction of your career. So this presentation, just so you understand, and why I'm talking about this, is about working in law firms. And the people don't always understand earlier in their career or even mid-career or after 10 plus years of practice, they don't understand, why you should make these decisions and why working in law firms is a really good choice. And I only, for the past 25 years, have only been working with people to make law firm placements because I believe in law firms, and you should too if you have the right information and want to work in them, hopefully because of the career benefits of doing so. If you work in a law firm, you're going to have the most career longevity that you will have in the legal profession, period. Law firms, people start working law firms at the age of 25. You can work there easily into your 60s. If you decide to go in-house, those jobs typically last a couple of years. And a lot of people that go in-house, a substantial majority of them, whether they're from the largest firms or small firms or mid-sized firms, they typically bounce around a lot. So they work for different companies. They may have periods of unemployment where they get let go by a company because companies are businesses and they have ups and downs. And when they do, they let attorneys go. They also have, they merge, they bring in new general counsels that want their own legal department. So if you make other career decisions besides working in law firms, it can be very risky. I also recently, there's every day when I log into BCG, there's a ton of attorneys that have been let go of government positions that they went into thinking there was stability because of this Dodge or Trump and Elon Musk were letting people go, in government positions. There's not a lot of stability there. And if you stay in law firms and you learn how to do that and the right decisions to make, you can have, there's no profession that has, or no aspect of the legal profession, except maybe being like a law professor, that typically will have more career stability. You may find it being a public defender, but that actually is usually working on your own. You may find it being a prosecutor to some extent, but in the majority of cases, the only time you're going to have career stability into your 60s and 70s and so forth is going to be in a law firm. Public, prosecutors, can't practice after a certain number of years, and it's just, there's so much stability. So you're going to get a lot of stability in a law firm. You're also going to get typically the highest level work. So you're working for paying clients, and you don't hold on to paying clients unless you're doing good work for them. And paying clients, you have the ability, depending on the clients you bring in, to do very good work. You also have, when you think about the stability, like what does stability mean in a legal job? Stability is very important because that means that you have the ability to support your family and know that you can, and that you're not going to probably lose your job. And even if you lose a job, you're going to be in a position to get another law firm job. And so stability for your family means, being able to buy a house, being able to afford cars, being able to save money for college education, being able to save money for retirement, and know that you're being able to do that. It means all these different things. And it also means you're probably going to be able to make a better contribution because you're going to have the ability to bring in different types of clients and contribute to them in that way. You're going to have the ability to expand your practice area and do other types of things. So you can start off in one practice area and then bring in clients and related practice areas and expand your skill set. You can bring in business, and once you bring in business into a law firm, those clients you'll learn how to service those clients and keep work going. You'll learn how to bring in new clients, and you will make as much money as you want to do. If you bring in a huge book of business, you can make millions of dollars a year. I know lots of attorneys that started off at middle market firms and now are making $10+ million a year with their book of business. You can get rich. You can if that's what you want to do. And there's also more respect for attorneys that work in law firms. If you work in a law firm, you know, you're typically going to be respected by your clients. You're going to have a different attitude towards your job, and you know, you're going to, you know, like I said, you're going to have, you know, the most career stability and be able to make contribution. And so you have to think about all these things, because anytime you walk away from a law firm or you make the career mistakes I'm going to talk to you about today, you're going to limit yourself. Now, I'm talking about a lot of limiting things today. And this particular webinar, I've given, you know, written about this stuff before, and a lot of it's controversial. I'm not saying that I approve of it in one way or another, but I'm going to tell you how law firms will evaluate you when you're looking at, you know, when you're looking at working for them. And I hope I've made the, you know, the benefits of working in a law firm, you know, as crystal clear to you as possible. But, you know, when you're in a law firm, another thing that's very interesting is once you get clients, you have the ability to work remotely. You have the ability to work in different locations, and there are law firms in literally every city in the country. I mean, you can go to a city of 10,000 people and there's a lot of lawyers. I mean, they're just everywhere. So, and the ones that are usually everywhere and that are the most stable and where you're going to find the most of them are people working in law firms. So law firms are a very good place to work. You can have a lot of career stability. People are often, you know, mesmerized by, you know, going in-house or going to work for a public interest organization or something like that. But those careers often, most often, don't go anywhere and they don't provide you the stability. So these decisions about working in law firms and the things you need to do, you know, are very, you know, important. I look at, you know, attorneys all day, every day, and I've been doing it for years. And I know the type of people that law firms hire laterally, and I have to invest a lot of effort into them. I would say that 85% of attorneys out there or recent graduates from law school, you know, don't have, you know, the right backgrounds to lateral into law firms. And so lateral into a law firm means, you know, you get out of school and, you know, you're trying to get there. And again, I'm going to talk a lot about prestigious firms today and kind of what they look for. If you're looking for a job and you're wondering why you're not getting interviews with prestigious firms, this will talk about that. All of that is you can overcome. But the rules I'm talking about are things that just have been around a very long time. And if you want to work, you know, in a top law firm, or really most law firms, because law firms are going to evaluate you more as a business proposition, and they have certain ways of looking at attorneys that I'm going to talk to you about today, and which most people don't realize. So people sit there for months and trying to get positions in law firms, and they don't know why things aren't happening. And so you have to be able to overcome what I'm going to talk to you about today, and you have to be able to understand why law firms may be more receptive to you or less receptive to you. So I just want to provide you very detailed information about things that you need to avoid. I'm going to talk to you about, you know, having been doing this for 25 years and made thousands of placements. I'm going to tell you the things you need to, you know, fix. But I'm just telling you kind of the rules that, you know, that law firms look for. I mean, they can be demanding environments. They're not all super demanding, but if you want to work in a law firm, you do need to take yourselves and your career decisions very seriously, and you have to be motivated by the importance of the firm's work and its clients. So when I say motivated by the importance of the firm's work and its clients, just think about someone that's hiring an attorney. If they're hiring an attorney, whatever you're doing for them is very, very important to that client. If you're an immigration attorney, they might, if you don't do things right, they're going to get deported from the US and their whole life's going to change. If you're a personal injury attorney, your ability to get them money is going to help them overcome injuries or get their life back on track. If you're a corporate attorney, you're helping a company with a merger or something that could determine the course of the company. So any attorney working in a law firm, the work is serious. It's serious to the client. It doesn't matter the practice area. A client wants someone that's going to help them and take whatever the problems they have seriously. And a lot of people go to work in law firms and they don't take the work seriously. They don't understand that the client's on the other end of what's going on. If you had a medical issue and you went to a doctor that didn't take their work seriously, you would be just appalled. If you had, if you were convicted of or accused of some criminal matter and you didn't do it, and or even if you did it and your attorney didn't take it seriously, you would be appalled. So think about like what you would want from an attorney. Think about what you would want from a doctor. You want people that take this stuff seriously. And I want to tell you how law firms work. I want to tell you about a lot of things today that will probably make you uncomfortable. And I'm only doing this because if I tell you these things, you hopefully won't be part of that 95% of or 85% of people that have a very difficult time getting positions in law firms. So the first thing that is important to law firms is if you want to work there, you need to have some sort of law firm experience. If you're a law student and you don't work in a law firm, for example, in your second summer out of in law school, you're going to have a difficult time getting a position. You should work in a law firm for free if you need to, but you need to get some sort of law firm experience typically if you want to get a position in a law firm. Law firms are different types of places. You're working for paying clients. The expectation of the work is different than in most other practice areas. The hours are different. The responsiveness is different. So law firms that are hiring attorneys, whether it's out of law school or it's in after a couple of years of experience, they want to hire people from other law firms. You would too, because it's too much risk if you're hiring people that aren't coming from law firms. It's just not something that law firms are, often willing to do. You want to make sure that, you definitely do everything you can when you're applying to a law firm to have that experience. If you are motivated by making decisions where you choose government work or you choose public interest work or you choose other paths earlier in your career, that's just a sign that that's not something that you're interested in. Because if you were interested in it, you would have done everything you can to get a job in a law firm. So a lot of people make a mistake earlier in their career or even later in their career to go into other practice settings. And if you go into another practice setting, it's very, very difficult for you to be marketable to a law firm because law firms are their own types of, business units and their own type of practice setting. That practice setting is what's marketable. It's not marketable if you're working in public interest or something. I mean, I see people that graduate from, Yale Law School and stuff all the time, and they go into these public interest jobs and they want to get a job in a law firm and they think anybody should be happy to have them, but they're not. I mean, they don't get hired. I mean, they can, but they usually don't get anywhere near the type of prestige level and stuff of a firm that they could get if they had law firm experience. So you need to have law firm experience. It doesn't matter where you went to law school, but you need to have that. And, again, I've worked with people that have been from like Harvard Law School, and then they may not have worked as a summer associate. They may have been more motivated by doing something else, working for a professor their second summer or whatever, going into the government. Despite, these backgrounds, I can place people, and but it's difficult. And, after him getting a position, which wasn't at a firm of the caliber, of most of, top graduate of Harvard Law School, he was concerned that there weren't, enough Harvard Law School graduates, and he was worried, that whether he would get the right experience, and then he wanted to know if he could, lateral to another firm after a couple of years. And, this person that got this job with zero private sector law firm experience, began asking questions about the firm, like were the hours what he wanted, what type of companies did this firm represent? Why weren't there more Harvard Law School graduates? And with all these sort of questions, I kind of, suspected that he might be better off without working in a law firm. He was basically sabotaging his ability to work there with all these questions, and then he didn't accept the offer. And he was very, very lucky to get it. We looked at a lot of places, and a lot of places, someone that goes to Harvard Law School, you would think that they would get a lot of interest from firms. But the thing is if you have no law firm experience, the law firm isn't really that concerned, excuse me, or interested in where you went to law school. They're more interested in whether or not you're a fit for that type of, practice setting. And, if this person never, received offers from law firms while he was in school, which happened. There were, pictures. I mean, there were concerns about his personality and commitment, like wanting to work in a law firm, trying hard when he got interviews to put forward his best self, not asking questions that are turning people off. And so, he, didn't get an offer when he was in law school and ended up not, working in a law firm when I got him an offer. So people, when you're in law school, you need to be doing everything you can to show law firms that may hire you after you're out of law school that you want to work in a law firm. If you don't have that information, if it doesn't look like that like on your resume and you haven't pursued it enough, meaning you do everything you can to work in a law firm, then it's going to be difficult for you to get a position. And that also goes, so you could do it when you're in law school, but you could also make the same mistake when you get out of law school, meaning and you take a job that's not in a law firm environment. And if you want to work in a prestigious firm, meaning an AmLaw 100, 200 firm, or even a very good mid-sized firm or a good boutique, you're just not going to get hired by one of those firms unless you have law firm experience. And you cannot experiment with your career early in your career. And even if you do that later in your career, it's going to hurt you. So attorneys should also be motivated by making money. Making money is something that attorneys and law firms do. When you work in a law firm, there's upward mobility, there's a chance to make more and more money, and people that are inside of law firms are typically motivated to try to make a good amount of money and to continually increase their income. And that's why they will work long hours. That's why they will deal with politics and trying to get ahead. That's why they will maybe try to get business later in their career. And if you're not motivated by money and the cost of it, which is, could be hard work, it doesn't, depending on the city you're in, it's going to be more or less, but, or the type of firm, but you have to be, motivated by money. Law firms, the promise of making more money as a partner or the promise of, staying there and so forth and making more and more money is based on your hours, your performance and your ambition to try to be a partner. And those are all money related things. Now, for some people, you may just work long hours because you love the work and you may improve your work because you always want to improve. But at the same time, if you're not motivated by money, then why would you, stay in that position? Why would you put, give your, expose yourself to that and stick around if you weren't motivated by money? Law firms, for example, one of the things that they love is when the attorneys that are working there get married, purchase homes, take on various financial commitments, meaning cars and things, where they have long-term obligations that can only be satisfied by working in a law firm. They want you to settle down because these obligations will make you stick around. They'll make you want to make more money. Law firms are businesses. They're not public interest organizations. You're accountable, and law firms function based on your accountability and ability to generate money. And so law firms want control over you. They want you motivated by earning money because that gives them more control. And the greater the drive you have for money, the harder you're going to work, the more business you'll generate, and the higher your odds of succeeding and advancing the law firm. So all law firms want this. They want you to be motivated by improvement. They want you to work hard so you can become like partners. Or if you're a partner, you also have to be motivated by money. Everyone in the law firm is, for the most part, motivated by money. Now, there are exceptions, of course, but money is a motivation. And most attorneys, that become attorneys, the majority of people, they come from families that didn't have a lot of money or where there were financial issues in their family, or they wanted to prove something. They want to become like the people that didn't have money. This is the majority of people that are attorneys. They always have some story in the background, law firm attorneys, about how they wanted to succeed because of various things. And I mean, sometimes their parents might have been doctors or lawyers, but the majority of people, like more than 50%, are motivated by proving something by earning money. And that's what keeps the attorneys motivated. And people will view, even though it's not true, people will often view money as a key to happiness, a reason for higher achievement. And just 1 second here, give me 1 second, sorry. Just give me one second. I apologize. I have this thing happening right now. Give me one second. Okay, so this is something that attorneys are motivated by. And if you're not motivated by money, that's okay. But you really do need to be motivated by money. And law firms, of course, want to pick that up, and that will help you. And why would you work 2,500 hours a year if you weren't motivated by money? So people go to the best firms because they're motivated by money. So if you're not motivated by money, then you're less likely to work long hours. You're less likely to deal with the stress. You don't have the incentive to keep going. So money is something that keeps people engaged. That's that are striving along line with the firm's goals. And I've seen most attorneys that are not motivated by money will often leave the law firm practice. So if a couple has children, the non-attorney spouse is the breadwinner, and the spouse earns, a couple $1 million a year, they'll usually drop out of practicing law. They will also often drop out of practicing law, and they won't do it very long if they come from very good financial backgrounds and have, a lot of money themselves, and they typically won't stick with it. So the only attorneys that often stick with it are people that need money. And why would you stick with it if you did, if you did it. So I've seen people, after winning massive verdicts and receiving a lot of money, quitting the practice of law. And because, the guy received, tens of millions of dollars from a huge personal injury case. But after that, he quit the practice of law. Actually, it wasn't personal injury. It was a patent infringement case. Another labor and employment attorney I know won a $25 million verdict, and he was actually representing me, and I wanted him to represent me to review a case. And after he won this verdict, he just said he was done dealing with this bullshit and walked away from the practice of law. So if you're not motivated by money, you're usually you should look for other alternatives in working in a law firm. You can teach law, you can work for the government, you can go into less taxing environments, but you won't be, in a law firm anymore. So law firms keep people motivated by money and the competition to earn the most. And if money isn't, a motivator, then they'll often, struggle to fit in with firms. Same thing with partners. Like partners in almost all law firms are very, very competitive about who makes the most money and how the law firm's compensating them. And then when they start looking for jobs, it's not all the time, but more than 50% of the time, it's about money. You have to be motivated also by prestige and what other people think of you. So how does that work with prestige? If I call up an attorney that's at like a middle market firm, which would be like a firm that doesn't represent the largest clients, and I tell them I have an opportunity for them at a very prestigious firm, the substantial majority of the time, like over 80%, these attorneys that have been practicing a while would be very interested in potentially working for one of those firms. And prestige comes in many forms for attorneys. They measure themselves by the prestige of their law firm, by the prestige of their clients, by the prestige of their peers, and even the prestige of working in the city where they practice. So people are very aware of how prestigious their firm is. And then when they go to firms, they'll say, oh, this person represents this big client, or this, there are other people, there's people here that graduated from Stanford Law School and things. They're motivated by that, and they talk about it. And so they're motivated by prestige, the prestige of their colleagues, the prestige of the law firm, the prestige of their peers. And almost all attorneys are like this in law firms. And they may not be part of that prestige level or be able to be competitive, but they're very, very aware of it. If you're an attorney at a large law firm and you come up against an attorney in a transaction or litigation that's not at a prestigious law firm, they will, the attorney, you will be often resentful of them, or intimidated by them, or impressed with how good their firm is or how good their background is. And at the same time, the attorney from the prestigious law firm will often look down on you. So people are just very, very aware of the prestige, and they're always trying to improve the prestige. They're trying to, work in a better firm, better clients, and prestige is something that just motivates attorneys, and you have to think that way. And that's just how it works. And it's what many attorneys, even if they don't like practicing law in a lot of respects, they'll often stick with it because they don't want to be looked at by other attorneys or even, their family and whatever but by not being part of the profession anymore in a law firm. So, without that hunger, like if you don't want to really, if you're not motivated by, you know, prestige, which could be money or whatever, you can leave larger firms for smaller firms, and a lot of smaller firms that won't be as much of a concern, and different practice areas is not as much of a concern. But if you want to work in a large law firm, you have to be motivated by prestige, and that's just how it is. I mean, attorneys will start off at a very good, like Am Law 100 or 200 law firm, and then because of this prestige motivation, will often move to a better law firm, or want to move to a better law firm, feel good about themselves for doing that. And it's just something that motivates the people that tend to do the best in the profession. They're just, very aware of their qualifications. They're often very aware of the law school awards they received. They're very aware of the firms that they've worked at. And I mean, I see attorneys all the time that, like, are 6 or 7 years out of law school and will tell me how they were a summer associate at some top firm, and they still, that's something that they still get their identity from, even though they're not working in a top law firm, or they did some other career path like go in house. And so, you are an attorney that's working in a law firm is a brand. And so as a brand, you want to go where that brand, where you feel like something is going to support that brand. So if you're an attorney at a top law firm, you'll probably only want to interview with firms that are exceptionally well regarded boutiques or other top law firms. You'll be very aware of the qualifications of the attorneys you're working with, and you'll surround yourself with people that you believe support this image. I see all the time, there's all these firms. I mean, they're in literally, if you have a market of, 30,000 plus people or 50,000 plus people, there's always going to be these groups of attorneys that will all be working together that went to a top law school. It could be three of them, it could be five of them, but they judge themselves based on that and who their peers are their entire career. And, I speak with attorneys that are very old, and they'll even talk about, they'll talk about where they went to law school, or their biographies on, law firm websites just contain all of these achievements and things. They're just very, very aware of it. And prestige is, like a reward system, and people use it. So, students collect their grades and extracurricular activities on their resume, and Boy Scouts collect merit badges, and attorneys, will remember significant compliments. They'll tell me that some general counsel said something really nice about them, and they'll be motivated by this. And if it doesn't motivate them, it can become very difficult to be a good fit for the best law firms, because law firms will use this prestige to push attorneys to work harder. They'll use this prestige to keep them working more hours to get clients. And if you're uninterested in this, then it can be very difficult to survive in a competitive law firm environment. So you want to have people take their reputation very seriously, and they want to have the best reputation possible. That's what keeps them engaged. And, people are motivated by the prestige levels of their current firms, and firm attorneys just take this very seriously. And nowhere is it more important for an attorney than the type of firm they work at. This is what keeps people motivated, and what law firms use. Law firms, use their prestige to confer it on their attorneys. It keeps them highly motivated. Prestige also has a lot to do with the type of clients you get as an attorney. So the more prestigious your firm, the bigger clients you can bring in. So law partners use prestige for themselves, and associates and things that go into firms. If you go to a top law school, you want to go to the most prestigious firms. If you didn't go to a top law school, then you get a job in a law firm, you'll want to go into most prestigious firms. So this is just something that is in the back of the head of the people that succeed in law firm environments, is they want prestige. Sometimes it'll be, getting on all sorts of committees and things. And but when I meet attorneys at prestigious law firms, I mean, their professional identity is most often tied to how prestigious their firm is. And, again, if I call any associate partner at a top firm and I tell them about a more prestigious firm that could be interested in them, they'll almost always, meaning, if I have a firm that would be interested in speaking to them, they will almost always speak at someone at a more prestigious firm, which should show you how seriously people take this. So how seriously do you take working at a good firm, and how seriously do you take trying to work at a better firm if you're at a firm? If the firm is less prestigious and I contacted an attorney and I say, I have this, opportunity at a firm that's not as prestigious as yours, and maybe I try to sell it, but they're very, very aware of the firm's market reputation and so forth, then they won't be interested. So why do good, the proof is just that the best attorneys will be motivated by how prestigious the law firm they are, and they often are their entire careers. And it's just amazing to me. I mean, I will talk to people in their 50s or in their 60s, and if they have an opportunity to place that's more prestigious, they will often be interested in it, but they won't be interested in places that are less prestigious, unless they're losing their job or something. They're motivated by prestige, and they will be intimidated by attorneys from more prestigious firms, or they will even, some attorneys, a lot of attorneys will even, if they go up against a transaction or a litigation or something against a more prestigious firm, and feel like did better or a better attorney negotiation, or did better in the litigation, that they will define themselves even based on being able to be a better attorney than people at the more prestigious firms. So this is how law firms attract attorneys. This is how they attract it. I mean, they retain attorneys. If a major law firm has an opening for something and it's very prestigious, they will get a ton of applications. People at less prestigious firms will send their resume all day long, and if they have an opening in a big city, and the law firm will only, often because the law firm is also motivated by prestige, will bring in the people that are at the best or not as good of firms. It's very interesting. Like, there are law firms that if you send them someone from a more prestigious firm, and they're a good sized law firm, but maybe not as prestigious, they will often overlook like red flags in the person's resume, like having been at, 3 firms in 5 years or things. I mean, just because the law firm's motivated by prestige. And so, if you're not motivated by this, like you have other interests, like you may be motivated by public interest, or you may be motivated by government work, or you may want to do something else later in your career, you're not going to last, and you will leave the most prestigious firms. you know you won't have the sticking power because you won't be motivated by this. And law firm candidates are also motivated by how the prestige of their firm's clients. So I talk to firms all the time, and they'll say, oh, we represent Elon Musk in this type of transaction. They define themselves based on that. Or the attorneys are impressed by the client, so they're impressed that the law firm has famous attorneys in it. Or the law firm represents the people that are clients that are very, very prestigious, so they're large clients, and they're impressed by that. Or the work that the firm's done, big cases and things. So all of this stuff people are aware of, and it's what motivates attorneys to stay in law firms. And to succeed, that needs to be something that motivates you. And if it doesn't, you're typically going to have a difficult time staying around a law firm. So you have to be motivated by prestige, and it's just something that makes things work. You have to have an identity that's related to practicing law and the type of clients you represent. It doesn't mean you need to work in the largest law firms, but something needs to motivate you. If you're an immigration attorney and you help an important individual do something in the United States, or you represent a large client. I had a woman that, back to Elon Musk, was an immigration attorney, and she was able to work on these immigration petitions for, I don't know, for who was it that she was working for people trying to build a super tunnel for Elon Musk in Las Vegas to get around. And she was doing all their permits, and she defined herself based on that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the biggest firms, but attorneys will definitely define themselves and be motivated by working around others, or working for places that have a good reputation, and then believing that it's important for them to be part of a group that does important things, or is the best at what they do, and also the matters you're working on. And you can gauge an attorney's level of motivation, how well they're likely to do in a law firm, by the enthusiasm they have for their clients, for one. And if you have enthusiasm and you're motivated by prestige, you're going to be someone that's passionate. So you're going to be passionate about your cases, you're going to attract larger clients, you're going to be a better attorney with details, you're going to be able to talk for a long time about the work you're doing. So how interested are you in the work you're doing? So I have attorneys that, maybe a corporate attorney and they've got 3 or 4 years of experience and they have a resume that just says, hey, I'm a corporate attorney. And they apply for jobs. And then you have other types of corporate attorneys that will take their resume and they will discuss what they do in corporate related work, but then they will also have 1 or 2 pages that, that don't just talk about the fact that they work at a corporate law firm or do corporate work. They'll have 1 or 2 pages where they talk about every transaction that they have. They're very interested in that and they list them all. And those types of attorneys are the ones that go the farthest and become partners. So you have people that don't have, this sort of passion for the practice of law, and then you have others that do. And to do well in a law firm and to have staying power, like you could start in a law firm and work there for 3 years and leave, or you could start in a law firm and at 7 or 8 years, be position to keep going. So you have to have that sort of passion. So think about, this motivation for the type of matters you work on. If you were, again, I like to give this example a lot because it's very pertinent. If you had some sort of awful kidney cancer and you had the choice of 3 nephrologists, which is a doctor that works on kidneys, you would have one that's maybe taught classes in medical school about it, that's these important residencies, that's the head of major hospitals, kidney research center that's on all these national committees and things about kidneys. And then you might have just regular people that just say they're nephrologists. Well, you're going to hire the person that's most enthusiastic, and that's the person that you would hire and want to work for you if you had something serious. And lawyers are the same way. I had, an attorney I remember interviewing from Gibson Dunn, which is an amazing law firm for a recruiting position. And, he just was, speaking with just so much enthusiasm about his experience and the work that he was doing. And, it came pretty obvious to me that this person should not be a legal recruiter because he was just too passionate about what he was doing. And he, was motivated. He'd gotten to Gibson Dunn from a lesser firm, and he was motivated by that and the enthusiasm for practicing law. He never should have, he was interested in leaving, I think, because there was some sort of departures of people in his practice area, and he felt like there wasn't enough work, but he needed to stay practicing law. So you need to be motivated by this. You either know you're not or not, but that prestige is going to keep you, motivated. And it's something that keeps even the attorneys at the best firms. They're just very aware of like the fact that they're working with the best people and they're working on the major things. And so it's just a very, important thing when an attorney is interviewing with any law firm. I mean, you're going to look up the attorneys you're working with. You're going to evaluate their educational credentials. You're going to evaluate their resumes and the things that they've done that are listed. You're going to evaluate the type of work that the firm does, and you're going to often, throw yourself into either enthusiasm or lack of enthusiasm based on that. You're going to do the same thing when you're up against attorneys at another firm. You're going to look them up and see what they're up to. And so people, that are motivated by this, it's what keeps them going. So a lot of attorneys are motivated just by the city they're working in. So a very common thing is for people to go to, it's interesting, they'll go to New York City as opposed to Austin, Texas. And so what's interesting is, so if you go to an Am Law 100 law firm in New York City, you'll make, and you're making 300, let's say you're making $200,000 a year, just as an example. You're making $200,000 a year. Your real take home pay is maybe 130 or something like that, maybe a little less. And then your cost of living is much higher. So, you may be making the equivalent of like $80,000, but when you take that same amount of money and you apply it to working in Austin, where there's the cost of living's cheaper, where the living, the taxes are lower. There's no state tax, there's no city tax. You might be making equivalent of 100 and, I don't know, 170,000. So you actually make more money when you work in smaller markets than top firms. But a lot of attorneys are just motivated even by the city. So they want to, they never would work in any place other than New York City, or there's other cities that are very prestige driven too. So if you people want to work in these kind of markets, and they're motivated by the prestige of the market. And so that's just another thing. Like, do you think that there's something wrong with you or would you prefer to work in a more prestigious market? Now, New York is a little extreme. But if you're working like in Fresno, California, and you think there's better opportunity in Los Angeles, that's something. So one of the other things that's very common, especially with young attorneys, I don't know where they pick this up. They might pick it up in law school. They might, I don't know, where they would, but a lot of these attorneys will come out and they'll distrust the business side of the law firm. They won't. The business side means they have to work a lot of hours, it means whatever, but they come in with this kind of attitude that there's something wrong with the fact that the law firm is a business, and they're suspect of it. They question it, and sometimes they'll question the ethics of assignments. So you might get an assignment in a law firm. The law firm might say, we would like you to work for three weeks investigating this matter and write us an in-depth memo and evaluate it from every possible way you can do it. And I had a candidate that had gone to the University of Chicago Law School, and he had done very well there. I mean, he was like one of the top 10 students in his class, so maybe even better than that, and had got a job at Washington, D.C. office of a New York City law firm. And a young partner that was very enthusiastic that he had a client gave him an assignment and said exactly that. I want you to work for 3 weeks on it. And so after he worked on it for a day, he came back to the part and he said, there's no reason to continue this research because this is the answer. And the partner said, no, I want you to do this. And he got a bad attitude and he said, I'm not going to participate in this or do this. And so he actually ended up getting fired when he was like 6 months or 4 months into a job because he was questioning the ethics of an assignment. Now, the ethics, that was his decision. The partner had his reasons for wanting that. I don't know what they were. Maybe he wanted to bill a lot of hours, but that was undermining the firm's focus on profitability. So you can't distrust the business side of law firms. If you think someone's overbilling or you undermine people that are the partners that are giving you work and supporting you, question the necessity of assignments. This all can happen. This is the candidate that went to a top 5 law school, and so you can't question the business side of the work that you do. Law firm is a business. You can't resent the fact that it's a business. You have to understand this, and if you distrust the business side of the law firm, it's going to hurt you. So you need to go into a law firm basically being like, this is a business and I'm going to help them. And my job is basically to be a product and to give that business what it needs. And as a product, you're responsible for billing hours and doing what they ask you to. And law firms, can, very quickly weed out people with these sort of anti-corporate attitudes. They may not like the fact that the law firm is representing a certain type of client. There were all these people earlier or last year that when different law firms had to basically, in order to keep government business, had to capitulate to things that Elon Musk and Trump were demanding of them. And there were law firms that did, and the ones that did, or most of them did, there were attorneys in those firms that just went ahead and resigned. They just were like, this is horrible. Like, we can't work at a firm that did these things on behalf of Trump, even though those candidates there were paid by the law firm, and it shouldn't matter who they're representing. It's a business, and and what they do. So the people left their jobs, and those people that left those jobs for that reason, regardless of whether or not they went to top law schools or had really good experience, they are not getting rehired in the market. And that's because they've very clearly shown future employers that they won't buy into the business of the law firm. So you have to basically buy into the fact that it's a business. And if you don't, that's a problem. So think about that. Are you critical of the fact that the law firm is a business? I had one guy not too long ago. He was in where was he working? I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, he was in New York, and he'd gone to Columbia Law School and done well there. He's a Harlan Fistone Scholar. I think he's the top third of his class, and had gotten a job at a major law firm and was unemployed and hadn't gotten interviews in like months. And his resume, which is craziest thing I've ever seen. He was a corporate attorney and he had like 5 or 6 sentences on his resume, and four of them talked about all this pro bono work he'd done. And then the last line said that he worked on corporate M&A or something. I mean, it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen. And no law firm is going to hire someone that just puts right up front that they're more interested in pro bono than corporate law. I mean, so this poor guy, I shouldn't say poor guy, but no one is ever going to hire him, not a large law firm, not a small law firm, because clearly he's interested in something else than the business side of things. You also, in terms of a business argument, you need to, law firms will hire people that believe what the firm is doing is important. They have to, if they don't think it's important, if you don't think representing clients is important, if you don't think getting the best result for people is important, and you're not motivated by that, then it's going to be very difficult to get a job. If you are interested in something else and you are coming across that way, then law firms will think you're not the right hire. If you are an attorney and you're working in a law firm and you decide you want to go in-house and then go back to a law firm, it's incredibly difficult because you're doing something that shows that's not your long firm or your long-term objective for your career. So you have to be motivated by believing that the work that the law firm does is important. You have to be motivated by, respecting people in the firm. You have to be motivated by the law firm's mission and role. Like, you have to feel this is all important. And if you don't feel it's important, then you're rarely going to be successful in law firms. Law firms, by the way, that don't feel the work is important also fail. I had a law firm representing me. It was interesting in Austin, Texas, and there were like 5 or 6 attorneys there, and they were all like at the very top of their class at University of Texas Law School, like really top, top 5% or whatever in the law review and all this. And so I hired them. They were cheap compared to larger firms, and they were representing me. And I couldn't believe when they got into court just their lack of enthusiasm and their overall lack of enthusiasm. And the firm, we learned as the more they represented me, it didn't have any work, hardly any work, and the people weren't doing well. And the firm actually ended up eventually just all the people just kind of scattering, went out of business. The people there didn't feel the work was important, so the firm failed. And conversely, if you don't feel that the work you're doing in a decent sized law firm is important, then you're not going to be successful. If you're an entry level or lateral attorney trying to work in a large law firm, in a decent sized law firm, very poor law school performance, it's going to be, difficult for you to get a job in a large law firm. It doesn't really matter as much with smaller firms and even some mid-sized firms. But, if you do well in law school, it shows your aptitude to some extent, and then it shows your motivation. So are you motivated in law school is really the only signal that, that law firms have of young attorneys. So law school grading is, often blind, minimizes bias, and so law firms take grades very seriously. If you go to not a great law school, unless you're at the very top of your class, most large law firms are going to have no interest in you. But even if you go to a top law school, the very, very best firms want to see the best grades, and they want to see people that are motivated by doing well. The better you do in law school, the better your career is going to be early on, because that shows that you're more motivated and try harder and have more aptitude than people that don't. So that's one thing that law firms look at. If you're a first-year associate, you're going to have a very difficult time getting a position. And often, if you look for positions multiple times in a short period, then you're probably going to have a difficult time often practicing law. People often throw the towel in quickly in firms or where they're working. What does that show? It often shows that the person may not have been doing well, or they might not be able to take criticism, or they can't integrate into what a law firm expects them to do, or they're not putting in the same effort and getting the same and overcoming the feedback like other people are. So if you're a young attorney, by the way, law firms will be very harsh with you. You will have to learn a lot early on. You will get feedback that's not always positive, and it's just because you haven't learned how to practice law yet. You don't know the expectations for the work or all these different things or how much depth you need to go into. So if you are looking for a job at that point, it's often showing you're not able to take feedback and get along, and so the new law firm is not going to want to experiment with you either. Why would you experiment with someone that's looking for a job after 1 year when you could find someone that's been at their existing firm for a couple of years and is obviously done okay to stay there. And if you're looking for a job too early, if you look for jobs every year, the perception is either that you're going to be unhappy at your next firm, or you're looking for a job just because you're not getting the law firm is not giving you positive feedback and or is asking you to leave. So, most first year associates looking for jobs have a lot of complaints about where they're working. In most cases, they're not reasonable. In some cases they're not, but you have to have a constitution to succeed, because when you do, you're going to do well. There are lots of people that go into organizations and for whatever reason don't do well and leave after a short period of time. There are similar individuals that will go into an organization and will realize that no organization is perfect. They'll do what they can to get along and they'll do well. So if an attorney is at a firm for 5 years and they look for a new job, the odds are very, very good that that person will stay 5 years at their next firm. If the law firm is looking for someone is looking to the same fifth-year attorney, and that fifth-year attorney has been at 3 firms in 5 years and stayed at each one in a year and a half or so, the odds are very, very good they're going to leave their next firm at that point. So you have to look like on paper that you're going to succeed and commit wherever you go. And the more you look like you're going to commit, the better off you'll be, because no firm wants to take a chance on hiring someone that doesn't look like they're going to commit and stick around when they have the option of hiring people that can. So first year attorneys, by the way, looking for jobs typically haven't been trained yet, don't understand what they're doing. They need to be able to take orders, they need to be able to be managed, they need to be able to have extensive criticism of the work. It takes to learn any practice area, by the way. People leave the practice of law or the different practice settings after 2 years or 3 years, but it really takes about 5 years to learn any practice area. I don't care what it is, to be good at it and to have the capability of doing it throughout your entire career. It takes about 5 years. And if you get that 5 years of training, that's something that will benefit you your entire career. So I think it's dumb for any attorney to leave a law firm before 5 years. And I think it's dumb for an attorney to try to work at too many law firms in that 5 years. Now, you can certainly move up in terms of the size clients and do all these great things, but you need to be able to commit to be able to be a good attorney. Once you get that 5 years of experience, you have something that you can literally do for the rest of your life if you choose. So you need to get that experience. And attorneys that look for jobs too early, law firms are better off avoiding them, and they do. Another thing is, if you're interested in a drastically smaller or much less prestigious firm than you're currently at, it can often be, difficult to get a position. So if the market is very slow, for example, and you're looking at much smaller firms that don't pay as much and so forth, the law firm's going to know that, you're probably taking that, out of desperation. You're going to come there and you're going to leave. So if you're a law firm and you have attorneys that went to, I don't know, top 100 law schools and stuff, and someone shows up that went to, I don't know, University of Michigan Law School and is at a big firm, that law firm knows that if they hire you, that you're probably going to leave when things turn around, which is exactly what people do. So if you're looking for a job at a firm that's way less prestigious than where you are, the law firm's going to think that maybe you're you're getting unemployed or whatever, you have struggles, and is going to often avoid you. So you have to be careful on that. So you typically, when you're looking for a position, you have to stick with something that makes sense based on your background. So if you're at a big law firm in Chicago and you want to move to Grand Rapids, Michigan, you can go to work at a good law firm there that might not be as prestigious as Sidley and Austin or something, and is really good in that city. That's fine. But if you start trying to move to much smaller law firms will avoid you. It's interesting because I have candidates all the time that are at large law firms and they actually say, I want to go to work at a much smaller law firm, but those much smaller law firms will avoid them. You would too. And the reason is because they'll come there and they'll find all this fault often with the way the law firm practices law, and they will be unhappy and they will leave. I had a girl that went to Yale Law School, and then she got a job with Sullivan and Cromwell in New York and worked there for like 3 or 4 years. And was just this exceptional attorney. They were allowing her to run major deals and things. And then I don't know why her husband moved or something, but she had to go to Silicon Valley. And her first job was with a very good firm there, like maybe it was Jones Day or something. I mean, a great firm. And she got there and they were overlooking, they weren't allowing her to lead transactions and everything. And so they weren't giving her the same responsibility. The clients weren't as large. So she was very upset and completely miserable. And then moved to another firm. The same thing happened. And then she just was like, okay, I'm going to take my law degree and do something else. I mean, just because she didn't like working these less prestigious firms. And, so that law firms, when they take that risk, it can actually hurt them. And smaller law firms know if you're trying to move at a firm that's way less prestigious, you're probably going to leave. It doesn't look good to other associates there when someone comes in and leaves because they don't feel the firm's good or whatever, or takes a better job, and it's just a waste of training. And and just kind of what happens. So every law firm, by the way, most law firms will bring in work and people will be expected to do it. If a law firm has a big case you're going to need, or a big matter or transaction, you're going to need to work long hours. And so in reality, most firms are very similar. There was a guy recently, another guy that was in New York and he went to Yale Law School and was working at a major law firm in New York, and decided he wanted to go someplace where there were less hours, and because there were less hours, he thought it would be a better lifestyle type thing. But he got there and he was making 50% less and the hours were the same. So it's just something to think about. But when people try out smaller firms, that typically, is just the exact same, less rewarding. And for them, they most always leave. If you're from a third or fourth tier law school with average academic performance, it can be, very difficult, for you to get a job in decent firms. Law firms will typically, your LSAT scores and your grades, your LSAT scores will show your intelligence in some cases. I mean, there's the game section is actually been correlated to an intelligence test of your IQs, which is absolutely crazy, but there's studies on that. And so if you do really well in your LSATs or you do really well grades, that's going to show your motivation and that your natural ability probably to understand problems. And if you go to one of these law schools and you don't do that great, you're going to have a difficult time getting a position in a large law firm. That doesn't mean you can't get a position in a smaller law firm, move up, but it means that's something that that other attorneys judge. Because when you go to a good average law school, the idea would be that maybe you weren't motivated enough in college, and maybe you didn't have this kind of natural aptitude and intelligence for practicing. Now, again, none of this means that you can't be enormously successful if you got really bad LSAT scores and didn't do well in college. I mean, some of the most successful personal injury attorneys in the country didn't go to good law schools. They didn't do well in the LSAT. They didn't get jobs in big firms. So you can do very well as an attorney. But if you want to work in a large law firm and you want to compete with other attorneys, you're that are there that have all this stuff, you're making a mistake. And so why are you making a mistake? So what happens, and I've seen it, what happens when you go to, it's like if somebody has the natural skills to be a professional basketball player, meaning they were motivated enough to continue practicing and practicing and practicing, and they have this sort of innate natural ability, these athletic characteristics, which make them tall or make them very athletic. So they have motivation to do very well in basketball. I mean, I think Michael Jordan was someone that didn't make his high school basketball team, and then practice and never stop practicing. So if you don't have that motivation, and you don't have like a natural ability, then why would you go to work in the best law firms solving the most complex cases and issues where you're competing with people? You may be good enough to be a Division IV basketball player in college, but you're not going to be able to play professional basketball because you just don't have the whatever it is. And so there's nothing wrong with not working in a large law firm. And if you try to do that and you don't have the motivation or the intellectual horsepower, that's kind of, that's why would you compete with people like that? I saw one time there was at Quinn Emanuel, there was a guy that was hired because his father was a huge client of the firm. And he went to this law school that used to be ABA approved, but ended up going out of business because it was called Whittier Law School. So he went to this, got hired, by Quinn as a favor, and literally wasn't able to understand all these different angles and things that the firm was trying to take. I mean, he was having a difficult time with basics. And so he just wasn't performing at the level of all these people that worked at Cravath and have been at the top of their class at Harvard and where I went in Virginia and so I mean, so the point is that you have to have some sort of innate ability often to work in these firms. And if law firms don't think you have it, just as professional basketball team's not going to hire someone without it, they won't. So if you don't do well also in a top and even a poorly ranked law school, people can go to law schools that are the fourth tier law schools, but if they're number one or two in their class, that shows something because it shows they're intelligent enough to get really good grades and they're more motivated than other people. If you did poorly in college, this is one of the things that I've seen in terms of people that succeed in law firms, just because, unless it's science or engineering, where it's very, very difficult to get good grades, if you don't do very well in college, that's a motivation thing. Now you can certainly become more motivated later, but this level of motivation of trying to get ahead of other people and so forth, that's something that's typically found in the people that do the best in law firms and the best attorneys. They're able to get very, very enthusiastic about whatever they're majoring in, get better grades, find purpose in that work and do well. The best entry level and lateral hires are usually those that have the best college performance. It's just if you do well in college, it's just something about your work ethic, your intellectual curiosity, your ability to bond with professors and make them like you. All these sorts of things will carry over, into success. If you're an entry level attorney, I spoke about this earlier, but if you're not a summer associate in a law firm or you don't do some sort of summer job in a law firm, it's just so difficult for you to get a position almost all the time. Even if you go to a top law school, you're not going to be able to get a job in a top law firm. If you do that, if you work in a nonprofit or public interest organization, law firms aren't going to have a lot of interest in you because you're not showing that you're willing to get one of these jobs somehow. And you can volunteer in every city in the country. There's so many law firms you can work with. So you can work with them for free if you want. So if you're not motivated enough to do that, that's going to hurt you. Lots of people will sue previous employers. That makes it, if you ever think about that, that can make it not impossible, but very, very difficult. So people will file these lawsuits. Sometimes they might have filed them before going to law school against an employer, but that just scares people away because they think that they're going to be, the next victim of that. And, people typically won't, investigate the cases, something there. This is one thing I also talked about earlier is too many jobs. So you cannot switch jobs frequently. The more you switch jobs, the less employable you are because people just believe that that's the next thing. You'll do the same thing. The best attorneys will be able to go into organizations and get along with a wide variety of people and do the things that the law firm requires and get decent feedback and then stick around and not always be looking for a job for whatever reason. People that move a lot typically will have been getting bad reviews or feel like they, don't want, whatever. They may feel like for whatever reason they don't want to be there. Now, I move people around for a living. I mean, that's what I've been doing for a long time. And attorneys have very good reasons for moving a lot of times, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, wanting to work on larger clients and moving firms and showing this path of upward mobility is good. Leaving firms when there's problems in their practice area and stuff. So you certainly can move. but there has to be some sort of commitment that comes through, and people have to believe you're committed. So they have to believe, if you're moving a lot, it makes it look like you can't get along with people. It means with partners will a lot of times move firms saying that they have business when they don't. Sometimes, people, will be toxic, and partners when they'll move. There could be, if you're moving a lot, there could be issues with your work quality. So people will have their work criticized and feel like if they go somewhere else, it's not going to happen. Being trusted, substance abuse is a very common one. So people that have substance abuse problems will often move. I've seen this so many times. I had one girl that she wanted to work in Germany, and she was, whatever, spoke German, a bunch of things. And she'd been in Chicago and got a job with a top law firm in Germany. And she got there and was just like, they couldn't believe it. Like, she was drunk during the day and so forth. And they have a different attitude towards substance abuse over there. I mean, they got her help and stuff, but she came back with still a problem. So some people will move, that have problems with substance abuse. A big one is people won't have work. So if you don't have work, that means that you do work for a partner, they don't like your work, so they don't give you repeat work. And then another partner gives you work and they don't like your work. And pretty soon you end up with, a bad reputation, and people won't give you work. And so FaceTime's another one. So, people that move a lot, it's just law firms don't like it. If you're unemployed, that's a huge thing. So you should never be unemployed for a very long period of time, and hopefully never. If you're unemployed, law firms have two choices. They have the choice to hire someone that is employed, or they have the choice to hire someone that's unemployed. If you're unemployed, but they don't know why you're unemployed, you could you could have gotten fired for one, or you could have quit because you didn't like the firm and couldn't stick it out. So law firms expect people, there's exceptions like women having children and things, but they expect you to remain employed as an attorney and not leave positions without a job. Leaving a position without a job isn't viewed as someone that just has reasons for leaving. It's viewed as you may have been fired. I had an interesting thing happen. The reason I became a recruiter, I'll tell you, when I was practicing law, by the time I was a third-year attorney, I had what would be the equivalent now of probably $500,000 or $600,000 in business. Like, I was just very good at getting work. And one of the reasons I actually got so much work is because people that have been in high school or in college like saw me just like all in, like just doing the best I could with everything. And they were like, you'll do the same thing with my matters. So I had a reputation among just even friends and things that I was all in. So I had this business, and I didn't like the law firm where I was at. They were firing all these partners. It just wasn't stable. And so I was like, I'll just start my own practice. And what happened to me was when I quit, and I gave like 2 weeks notice, and people just kept assigning me work and giving me feedback and stuff as if I hadn't even quit. And so Thursday, I was scheduled to leave on a Friday. The managing partner of the Los Angeles office of my firm from New York came into my office. He's like, you can't quit. Like, if you quit, like, people are going to think that you lost your job, and you're going to have a very hard time, finding a new one. And you're going to make a huge mistake with your career. And if you're a solo practitioner, like, that's going to limit you and all this stuff. So he told me to spend the next 2 to 3 months going out and talking to legal recruiters. And I wish I got interested in recruiting. But the point is that if you quit a job, it can become very difficult. It shows you may not be committed enough. It also shows you may have been fired or asked to leave. And so when you leave a firm, even if you have very valid reasons for doing so, just keep in mind that you're going to be compared to people that didn't leave firms that are currently employed that don't have these questions. So if you want to leave a firm, you should do whatever you can to find a position first. Or if it looks like you're going to get fired or something, then you need to go all out and try to find a position fast. And I recommend that everybody in the legal profession, you should always be aware of the jobs and things that are in the market, whether you're looking at Indeed, or you're looking at Law Crossing, or you're looking at LinkedIn. You should always be aware of where you can work so you can act in a moment's notice. If you don't take your career seriously, that comes across in interviews. People go into, they reveal their lack of enthusiasm by the things they write on their resume. They can see that they can, develop the enthusiasm based on the way people talk. And so, law firms are interested in your commitment level. Like, one of the there's 5 things that are important to a law firm when they're hiring someone laterally. I mean, one is, can they do the work that they have? The other is, can they be managed? But the big thing is like, does this attorney really want this work? Because if you don't, it's going to come across. And if you come across as someone that's wishy-washy, lacks enthusiasm, or doesn't necessarily want to work there, do the work, then they're going to hire someone that does. And so again, they want people that are motivated. I'm almost done with these. There's not too many more, but the law firms also, if you fail to pass the bar, that's a big deal. So sometimes people will fail it 3 times in California, and the bar is not a test of intelligence. It's really a test of how hard you study. And so if you study hard for it, I mean, really, really hard, depending on the bar, that's a sign of your commitment. And if you don't do that, that can hurt you as well. I've talked about this earlier. It's not a big one, but if you're a senior attorney without business, or you don't show a potential to generate business, that's a problem. Every attorney that gets senior in a law firm, your goal is to have your own business, because that business feeds associates. It helps the law firm be profitable. Law firms can only sit there and operate if there are partners with business. That's the whole objective of a law firm. A law firm is a platform for partners with business to have office space, associates, legal secretaries, a brand behind them, what business and things that they can give to other attorneys and other practice areas. That's all a law firm is. A law firm exists for partners. So if you're not part of that group and you're relying on others to give you work, then you're going to have a very hard time staying employed in the legal profession. Now, that doesn't mean that there are firms that won't give you work if you're a senior attorney, if you don't have your work, but attorneys are expected to develop clients, and you get clients when you impress the people that you've worked with at previous firms. They will give you clients if there's conflicts. You get clients when you make time in your when you take your career seriously enough to make time to network and do things that help you get clients. You make clients when clients you worked with at previous firms are very impressed with your work and your commitment, and they give you clients at new firms. I mean, lawyers get clients if they're like very high up there and they do a good job. And if you're not getting clients, that is very dangerous. If you will have a hard time getting employed. Though one of the main reasons people don't understand why they get employed is not only are there all those signs of like maybe you didn't do a great job and things in previous jobs, which you may have, but the problem is like if you're a 15th year attorney, the law firm with all your experience will have to bill you out very close to what a partner bills out, and clients want partners to do the work that are billing out a lot of money. And lawyers make more money when they bill their own work. So if a lawyer is billing out $1,000 an hour, they make it to keep 500 of that, and for the work that they do and collect. And if they're giving it to other people, they might only collect 150 or nothing. So but lawyers need to be profit generators. You need to turn your practice into something where you have business and where you're doing your own work and you're a cost center, not a profit center. And so this is a whole kind of major thing that underlies the entire legal profession. When you go in-house, you're a cost center. Like, so you're taking money and not necessarily generating revenue. When you work for the government, like one of the reasons all these federal government attorneys are being let go is they're considered cost centers, and the value that they're providing doesn't meet the reward. If you are senior and you go into a law firms are very aware when they talk behind closed doors that if things don't go well for you or whatever, you could sue them. So, and you have to be able to go into interviews and connect with people. The main reason is that shows how you will interact with clients, because if you connect well with the people there, they're going to like you and feel comfortable with you and want to hire you. But that also shows kind of how you would operate with clients. Clients want to feel comfortable and connected to their attorneys. And so to give you contact with clients, you need to have good personal skills to get along with attorneys at work. They would rather work with people that are connected to them than not. So who would you hire? It doesn't mean you need to be a social butterfly, but you need to build rapport and make people feel that you're going to be easy to work with and they'll like you. And, people are not hired necessarily because of diversity quotas and things like that. The people that are hired are the people that are able to connect with people. So you would do the same thing. You would hire people that connect with you as opposed to not. And again, not being interested in the practice of law, that comes through. You want to do the work, you're enthusiastic, you have a lot of interest, and people that are not going to spend hours a day practicing law and doing it if they're not enthusiastic. And if you're enthusiastic and interested in it, they're going to get better and better, and you're going to look for problems, and you're going to think what you're doing is fun. And you have to be able to go into interviews, and you have to be able to have that passion, because if you don't, it's not a long-term fit. If you don't want to work in a law firm when you're a law student, you're not going to have that enthusiasm. And if you're become, a practicing attorney, you have to have that enthusiasm as well. You cannot be coming out of in-house or government environments if you expect to get a job in a law firm. So once you make the decision to do that, you're going to have a very difficult time getting back into a law firm. Law firms are what they are. They're businesses. So law firms compete with each other to do the best work. The hours are longer. They have to do what the client wants. They have to have certain types of interpersonal skills with clients. And it's different with the government. Government positions, there's ones where I know people that have worked in like these military branches of the government where they literally will do a few hours worth of work per week. Now, other people will do more, but it's just different. And the expectations aren't as high. If you go in-house, what happens to a lot of in-house attorneys, they become experts in giving work to others and not doing it themselves. And if you're interested in another practice setting, they know that you're unlikely to stay. So why would they hire someone that is coming from in-house when they could hire someone that's in a law firm? I see people all the time, and it's very interesting. Like during the most active parts, like when tech is exploding and there's just all this work, you'll see a lot of corporate hiring in places like Silicon Valley, and they'll have just this tremendous demand. Like firms like Wilson Sonsini will hire people from out of state and actually run bar preparation classes at the firm. And they'll be hiring all these people. But the people that have been at these top firms and gone to great law schools and then gone in-house, for example, like just crickets. Like they won't get any interviews, even though there's like huge demand. And so law firms are, they're competitive places. There's an upper culture. They may not exist in-house or the government. So people, won't do that. One thing that's very interesting that you should always consider when you're looking for a job. So if you're working in another city, so say, you're in Chicago and you're from Oklahoma City, I don't know where, and you're applying for a job in Oklahoma City, it's pretty interesting. Like you'll get a lot of interviews and you'll get, whereas if you were in Oklahoma City, you get, farther, much fewer interviews. And so the reason is because, these moves typically aren't performance related. They're related to coming home, to settling down some area. And so, moving to a less sophisticated market or where you're from is often is looked at as a very good thing. I had a woman that was working in Ohio, and she was from Portland, and she'd been in the Olympics, which is kind of interesting, but hadn't even gone to a top law school. And she was moving back to Portland, and she got 10 plus interviews. But I think people liked her because she was moving home and less of a risk, and she had kind of an interesting background. But when you're trying to look for firms, or jobs in your own market, law firms don't know why you're doing that. They think that maybe you could be leaving because of performance issues, getting along with others, maybe you're losing your position. But when you're moving to a market where where you're from and you grew up, that's always like a good move if you can see yourself, settling down there. And just a couple of the final ones, or this is, I think, maybe is this the final one? Oh, this is one of the final ones. If you have any form of sense of entitlement, and about what you're owed because you went to a great law school or whatever, and you're motivated by how much bonuses you're getting, you're motivated by all those sorts of things, that typically is going to just create a lot of problems for you. You really need to be motivated by the fact that the law firm is training you and giving you work. You need to not be, so upset about little tiny, things that may not be that worthwhile. I had an attorney that just last week was a solo practitioner, and he never worked in a law firm. He was a trust and estates attorney, and but never worked in a law firm, and he was ways out of law school. He's like 10 years out, and he got a job offer with a great firm. And And then he came back and wanted to negotiate the salary, wanted to negotiate these other things. And I told him, like, you shouldn't negotiate. And he tried to negotiate, and they basically called him up and they're like, these are all the problems with you. Why are you negotiating this? Like, this is what you have going for you. This is what you don't. And why would you have the sense of entitlement? So they pulled the offer. And this happens all the time. If a law firm, if you try to negotiate things too much, you think, you're trying to negotiate a bigger bonus and things, or you have the sense of entitlement, and you bring that in, then that's going to affect other attorneys in the firm. They're going to be hard to manage, like all these different things. And so, people that have a sense of entitlement will often be people, that attended a top law school, or, have been working at prestigious firms and think that people should be, that they should, give them all these different things. When maybe, they have to, be aware of that, that they shouldn't have a sense of entitlement. So, and because, this can hurt you. I see people all the time that, that don't have this kind of middle class work ethic. It's something I don't like to talk about, but I will just real briefly here. So people that don't come out of positions where they have models, or where they understand this kind of model of the world. The model of the world of being an attorney is not like working in a factory and getting unionized and fighting for an extra $5 or $10 an hour or something. The idea of a law firm is you're kind of in partnership with the firm, and the more you contribute, hopefully the better you do. So you can't come into things with that sort of sense of entitlement. And it's often people from marginalized groups, whether your parents were working class, but sometimes it can be along racial lines to some extent, where you might not have had those models and your parents might have been working classes. It's not to say it's along racial lines, but it's if you didn't grow up in a great atmosphere, and you don't have models for this sort of stuff, then people, will often think that the most important thing is getting this little bit of extra stuff, and they'll have this sense of entitlement, or they'll have it based on where they went to law school. And if you have that sense of entitlement, people pick it up and they won't hire you and won't keep you around. Then the final one that's very important is, anytime you're applying for a lateral position, law firms want to see that you have some sort of upward trajectory on your career. Like, for whatever reason, there's something you're trying to improve, something like you're trying to get better work, or you're trying to focus more, or you're trying to work in a bigger firm, or you're trying to work in a smaller firm that will provide you more trial experience or more control in transactions. So law firms, when they hire my candidates, the majority of hires, like, and this is a very important point, the majority of hires, like over 50%, are people that I'm able to position as this next move to this firm is a move up compared to, what they would be doing moving, just compared to what they're currently doing. So law firms see themselves as in a position where, people are moving up. And if you have a series of moves to smaller and less prestigious firms, and there's no real reason for it, it's a downward trend, and people don't like it. So people want to hire people that look like they're on an upward trajectory, because if they're on an upward trajectory, presumably they're going to try harder. So if you have two candidates, often one who's been at two Am Law 100 law firms, and then one who may not be at an Am Law 100 law firm, but a very good law firm, and didn't go to the best law school, the law firms will actually often prefer the person that didn't go to the best law school and is at a decent firm, because they think that that person's going to come there and work hard and not have a sense of entitlement, and really commit themselves to it, because this means a lot to them moving to a better firm. So, rising stars and things are much more valuable to firms than people that are, going downward, if that makes sense. So these are just some of the warning signs. I mean, this is a lot of information. These are a lot of things you need to do. These are things you need to avoid and do to do well in the legal profession. And like I said, 85% of the resumes that I see are making these mistakes, and it holds people back. You can always change what's happened. Just because you didn't go to a top law school and do it done well doesn't mean that you can't do that in the future. But you need to look at, what law firms are looking at. Now, they don't always articulate this, but these are kind of the things that are going on behind the scenes. These are the things that law firms have told me in private, or just directly over the past 25 years. So we'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, I will answer questions. This is a live webinar, so pretty much, most questions you ask, I will answer unless there's ones that are kind of going over the same point. And then you should feel free to ask as many questions about whatever. It doesn't have to be about this presentation, but anything related to your legal, to your career, I can answer. So this is a good time, for you because, whatever you're thinking also is stuff that other people probably are. So it's helpful to listen to these questions. And so it's usually the most valuable part of the presentation. So thank you. Back in a minute. We'll get to questions right now. Just 1 second. All right. So again, feel free to ask questions about anything. So it doesn't have to be, again, related to this webinar. It can be any questions. First question. Okay, and you should feel free if you're, just so you're aware, like all these questions are anonymous. So if you're logged into Zoom and your name shows, I'll just copy your question. I won't show your name or anything like that. So it's all confidential. Okay, so first question. I practiced for more than 20 years. I'm now in a public sector job. I was an associate and then a large firm for 2 years early in my career. One thing that newer attorneys experience at large firms is some unhealthy competition or even sabotage within the firm. Back then, that was particularly the case for minority attorneys who are not mentored or exposed to top assignments. Do you think improvements have been made to support newer and/or minority attorneys? How cutthroat is it really? Okay, so that's a good question, and it's actually a very difficult one for me to answer without getting into trouble. So, because you have to, this is one of these kind of subjects that you have to really tiptoe around, like almost like the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. So the discrimination or the fact that minority attorneys will often say that they weren't mentored or exposed to top assignments, there's kind of like two ways to look at that. Like, so the first way is to say that minority attorneys, that there's discrimination and, or maybe people are uncomfortable with them, or they don't think they're smart enough. Maybe they think they got into law school because of affirmative action or whatever it is. This is the attitude of the thought pattern and that there exists. And now there's only one book that's ever been written about diversity in law firms, and I wrote it. So I've actually studied this a lot, but here's the issue. So this is for anybody that's not just a minority attorney, but people that are from often working class backgrounds, that may not have, socialized a lot with people in law school, that may not, when they go into law firms, socialize with the attorneys there. And so what happens? So the success of an attorney in a law firm is often the product of the filters that they have. And this applies to everyone. So I want to explain this. So it can be your class background, which could be, working class or whatever. Working class means your parents were working class. It can be your social abilities, which I'll talk about in a second. Social abilities, and then it can be your peers, which I think is another one, your peers. So your peers in law school, then out of law school. So what if filters mean? So filters mean, so when I was in college, I had no interest in, no thoughts of attending law school or business school or anything like that. But suddenly I'm at this like top 10 college, and everybody that I'm around, or a lot of them, are suddenly talking about the importance of going to a top law school, like the grades you need, like all this sort of stuff, the LSAT scores you need. And then I was around other people that did go to these top law schools that were older than me. So I started viewing the world through a filter of what was necessary. Then I got into law school and I was surrounded by peers that also had these same goals and thought about things a certain way and told me what you need to do, like how you need to act in interviews, all these different things, how hard you need to work when you get into a summer job, the importance of the type of summer job you got. So what I'm saying is, and then my father had gone to like Harvard and my Michigan Law School and then dropped out. My mother had gone to, University of Michigan and almost got a doctorate. I mean, so I'm surrounded by these people that have very high expectations, that understand how to view the world in a certain way. I worked in firms in the summer where I wasn't isolated, where I was, associating with people that were highly motivated. I wasn't not associating with them. I was surrounded by all these different people that instilled in me the importance of all this sorts of stuff, type of firm you work at, how you need to act, how to bill out, the importance of billing hours, like all these sorts of things. If I hadn't been surrounded by those people, I never would have gone to law school. I never would have gone to a top law school if I did. I never would have worked in a top law firm, and I never would have done well in the top law firm because I understood very early the importance of business. Now, it doesn't matter. You can make these observations along racial lines, but you can also make them just along lines of like, who are your peers? Who are you associating with? How are they creating filters for you in the world in terms of what you should do? And if you get into a law firm and you're not associating with the people that have those filters, like other associates, and even trying to network with partners and things, if you're not part of that, it could be because just of your personality. It doesn't have to be along racial or lines. It could be because of the type of people that you've associated with, because you're someone that's a loner. Like all these different things will affect how well you do. And so this is a very good question, but ultimately the people that you surround yourself with and that you learn from are going to be, and if they're successful and doing well, and you're going to pick up their ways of thinking and everything, and it's going to translate into the levels of success you have. If you're an attorney that's not at a great firm and you want to become very successful, you should try to associate and learn from other attorneys at great firms. They will teach you you will pick up the ways of thinking. So what happens to a lot of attorneys is they will get into law school or whatever. They will wind up getting into decent law schools, but then they won't have a peer group. And then when they get into law firms, they also won't have a peer group. And that affects how well they do. And so you can make a lot of arguments about why that happens. It could happen to anybody, but it certainly can be more pronounced in some groups rather than others. So everything is about when you think that things are wrong in a law firm, they're often what's wrong is your filters. And so the benefit of going to Harvard College or something like that is that you're going to be surrounded by people that are going to have these filters about what they can do with their lives, whether it's being a famous novelist or whatever. And those filters are typically going to be different than you would get at a state school unless you associate with those sorts of people. So that's the issue with mentoring top assignments, is that you're only going to get that if you learn the game and you're surrounding yourself with people that are doing these things. And so it used to be women couldn't do it and they were having problems, and then but things change. So your question is, is there improvements to things that can support minority attorneys? Yes, law firms will mentor them more so they can often, if they're not from a background where they're associating with other people from, other people like them, other people that can show them kind of the ropes, then they will, do much better. And then not, in every school, in every group of people, there's people that surround themselves with people that can help them be successful and ways of thinking and stuff. And so if you come out of an environment where, say, you went to school, you got into a great law school for whatever reason, but then when you're at that law school, you weren't associating with people and learning what they thought, you were just kind of a loner, then you're going to have a lot of issues when you to get a job. And then when you get into a job, if you do the same thing, because you're not going to have models to succeed. So if you're in law school and you associate with only one group of people, and that group of people isn't integrating with people in the law firms, it could be whatever. It doesn't have to be racial lines. It could be along all sorts of different lines, sexual orientation. It could be from another country. It could be all these different things. But if you're not doing that, then that typically will create, issues for you in the long run. So I hope I gave a good answer to that, because it's a very important question, but it's all about ultimately the filters and the way you view the world through those filters and the decisions you make in response to them as things you do. What should I do if I'm burned out as an attorney that don't want to leave the law? Well, if you're burned out as an attorney, there's different reasons for being burned out. So one reason for being burned out would be that you don't like practicing law, and that it doesn't do anything for you. So if you just don't like practicing law and it burns you out, you don't feel good about it. And if that's the case, then that's something. If you're in a environment which is just you may enjoy the work, but the environment is just incredibly taxing and unpleasant, then you can move to an environment that's not. So, I talk to people all the time, might be some like major New York firm, and they're just like, I don't mind the work, but it's from a human condition standpoint of, working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, it just doesn't work for me. That's a form of burnout. Burnout can mean different things. So if you're burned out, you have to ask yourself, is it because of you don't like the work? Is it because, you don't feel, like you can go on? I mean, I don't know why you'd be burned out. If you like the work and it gives you enjoyment, you can always move to a firm doing the same work where you might be not, it may not be is incredibly taxing as it is. A lot of people make the mistake of if they feel like they're burned out, they move in-house, they do things like that. And that's not always the best decision. You can always move to a firm where it's not going to be as crazy, but keeping in mind that every firm represents clients. And so if there are important matters and things that come, the work that needs to be done, then you need to work those hours. And it's just, you would want the same thing. If a doctor that performed needed to perform surgery on you, and they, in the hospital, you're in some, I don't know, you're in, some market like Nebraska or something where there's not a lot of people and there's only one surgeon, that person's going to have to do all the work that walks in the door. So you have to, if you enjoy the work, you have to just maybe put yourself in another firm. Most people make the mistake of moving to a different practice setting, which isn't, the right thing. Okay. Currently, I'm the government attorney who handles all my local government's unemployment matters related to discharge. I'm debating whether I should transition to my office's litigation department, which would be more marketable in the future. Eventually, I want to earn more money. I have an extensive criminal law background. I've practiced for 10 years. Okay, well, it's actually, unemployment and employment law is a good practice area to be in. Anytime you're in a more focused practice area, you're better off. So employment attorneys it's a very marketable practice area. It's one of the few practice areas where you can often, work in all these different firms without having to book a business. So I don't know, if you're just filing papers or you're doing litigation, but that's a good any employment law is a good practice area. So if you're getting good experience there, that's something that potentially would be marketable. It would be marketable to other government offices. It would be marketable to in-house employers. It would also be potentially marketable to law firms. I don't know the type of market you're in. If you want to do litigation and you're not doing litigation, you're just doing paperwork and stuff, then it may be more marketable to be in a litigation department doing litigation. So the basic rule is that, more than 50%, I think probably more than 75% of jobs in the country and are litigation. So every city, every county, like there's always a bunch of litigators. If you live on a block of like 50 houses in almost any city, middle-class city in the country, there's going to be one litigator on them. There's just tons of them. So learning to be a litigator is good. If you want to do, make more money, you could be a personal injury attorney. You can do all sorts of things with litigation experience. But I don't know, the transition to criminal law from unemployment to litigation is, you're going to need to pick a practice area at some point in the future, and whatever that practice area is, you need to make sure it's the right one for you. But typically, anytime you work in the government, there's just different expectations, the work quality, hours and things. So if you do want to work in a law firm, you're pretty much better off trying to do that right now. If you don't want to do employment, then you can switch over to litigation. But employment attorneys can make a lot of money. They can be plaintiffs' employment attorneys, or they can just do employment counseling, or they can do employment defense. So it's a good practice area. But I don't know why, if you're doing litigation there, I don't know why you would move, because employment does have litigation in it. So it's, a good practice area. So it's a lot of short questions. Let me see. Okay, let's see here. Thank you for this webinar. As an update from taking your course, I was able to accept a wonderful job that aligns with my career goals. Thank you for these webinars, Insight. I'm embarrassed to share that I've been a few the professional red flags. I've started my business professional fashion company. Can you please share advice on how an attorney can recover if they've done some of the red flags you've shared? Great. So, well, I mean, it sounds like you have gotten a job. I'm assuming you took, let me see, a Big Law Breakthrough. Let me see if I can find that URL. Give me one second. So I do have a course. I'm just trying to put up the URL here. Give me one second. Pulling up a thing there from someone who said they took my course. Okay, so for those of you that enjoy these webinars and are interested in learning, I do have a course that people seem to do very well taking. You can take online. It's a pretty in-depth course. Let me just see here, pull it up. And this is the course, Big Law Breakthrough. I don't know if you can copy that, but that is a course that I teach. You can find it on my bio in BCG, but the course can help you. It goes into pretty much all the details and things you need to do if you want to try to work in a better law firm or a large law firm. You can sign up and take it there. There's actually, before you sign up for the video, there's like a 1 hour discussion about how to overcome things in your background and get a position, how to search for jobs and all the stuff that I think is very, very helpful and can help you. But so you started your own business fashion company. Typically, one of the things that you need to do on your resume, law firms do not like hiring entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs will typically be the sorts of people that leave and start their own firms, or will just have this kind of itch in that makes them want to start a business and won't stick around. So I always recommend that people that have their own business to take that off their resumes. If you have these red flags, typically the best thing you can do is eliminate them from your resume or downplay them. So I was working or speaking to a woman that I was helping for a friend, and she's an academic that goes to Pepperdine Law, is getting a PhD or something in Pepperdine, wants to work in a law firm for whatever reason, and her entire resume just talks about papers and things that she's written. And so how do you fix that? You just remove all that and just list your law firm experience and then downplay things that don't have anything to do with that. So you need to learn how to write an effective resume and all those sorts of things. So I don't know if this URL is copyable. I'll put them in the chat. Let me see if I can do that. I have the ability to do that. I don't think I do. So, I apologize. I will share to Spotlight, share, and Q&A polls. Yeah, I don't have the ability to do that, but I'll make sure that I send everyone this course. I unfortunately don't like to aggressively sell things, which I probably should. And that goes. It's a good course, and lots of people have taken in thousands and can help you, over the years. Let's see here. Okay. Do you offer a career consultation? Okay. Let's see here. I worked in 2 firms in 3 months, previously a solo for 6 years. I understand the perception of law firms that don't want to invest in someone who hasn't stayed long at a firm. I'm realizing my errors with both firms. How do I professionally articulate that I'm no longer at either law firm due to bullying, gossip, drama, etc.? I'm damned if I do or don't. I've been getting interviews in spite of these 2 issues, but they tend to spend a lot of time on quick departures. And I'm like, why are you interviewing me then? So, yeah. So first of all, gossip, drama, and all that sort of stuff I don't know about bullying, but gossip and drama is going to be present at all firms. And so there's kind of 2 types of people in firms. There's the people that participate and take sides or get interested in that, or there's people that don't. So every firm is going to have things negative about it. Every firm is going to have people that either are against the firm or for the firm. And so what does that mean? So if you are for the firm, that means that you're just going to basically not get involved, not take sides, not involve yourself in it. You have absolutely no benefit there's no benefit to you getting involved in gossip and stuff, because law firms know the people that are against them and negative. They can see when people go onto doors and the people that are negative associating the people, they know that person's gonna be negative. So you just don't get involved. And that's actually one of the biggest pieces of advice that I can give you. I mean, and that everyone in this webinar, it may be one of the most important pieces of advice that you'll hear today, because law firms basically are constantly pushing people out that are negative and bringing people in that they hope are not. And that's the job of a law firm. Job of a law firm to be a functioning organism is to have people there that are positive. And not against them. So the second a law firm thinks you're against them, they will start giving you negative reviews, even if they're not justified. They will stop giving you work. They will do all these things to push people out that are negative. So you can either go into a place and make it work, or you can go into a place and get involved. And it sounds like you were a solo, so you weren't having to deal with that, but that's how it is at law firms. You will go into a law firm, any law firm. It could be, solving a crime law, Cravath, Swaine and Moore. There will be people that are negative, and those people will come up to you and say all these negative things and try to talk you into, make your friendship almost dependent on being part of that negativity. And every law firm has things wrong with it. Every law firm has too many hours. Every law firm has partners that have problems. Every law firm has issues with clients. There's stuff wrong with every law firm. You can either come in and make that work or not. When I first started a recruiting firm, there were my first two hires were one woman that had worked at a previous law firm like 16, 17 years. The next hire was a woman that had worked at a law firm for 8 years. Those two recruiters, but to tell you a quick story, after those recruiters, I started hiring all these people that I thought would be good recruiters because they went to top law schools and had worked at top law firms, but they were unemployed, a lot of them, most of them. Or they'd worked at one firm for 1 year, another firm for 1 year, and I hired them thinking that these excellent backgrounds would really make them good at recruiting. Well, all of those people that have been at the firm, the last place for 1 year, got into our company and just started being very negative. They would be negative about me. They would be negative about the company. They would be all this negativity, these people that worked with firms previous year. So almost everyone that came in and worked for 1 year was gone within 1 year. But not only that, they were just completely toxic and stuff after just 6 months. And then they would try to get other people to join them in their negativity and try to get other people to all join with them and start recruiting firms. There's all these different problems. And so I learned that you can tell a lot about a person based on whether or not if they've been fired or left jobs, they quit things and stuff, because those people kind of come in and are toxic. Whereas there are certain people that are exposed to the same set of circumstances, the same things wrong with the recruiting firm, the same issues that don't get involved in that and stay employed. And each of those people, by the way, that didn't get involved in that, I mean, had very, good runs at the company that made great money. And, so you need to, think about that. And that's how law firms think. So if you have these issues with your previous firms, you don't want to talk negatively about the firm. You don't want to go into a lot of detail. The best things you can say are, the firm didn't have enough work. Maybe that's true. Or they were losing clients, or, whatever. Or, you can say maybe once that one firm wasn't a good fit, but you have to have, typically people don't want to think that you're going to be a problem at the next firm you go to. And if you were a solo for 6 years, that means that you developed all sorts of habits and ways of operating that probably are not at the same level as an organized firm, just because you've had no one to train you. So if you're a solo practitioner trying to go into a law firm, you need to really buckle down and try to learn and raise your, with the kind of attorney you are. Meaning a solo is probably going to work on smaller clients than with lower expectations than an organized firm that's going to have probably, larger clients that are going to have work for associates and have work for partners and that sort of thing. So you need to really buckle down and learn. But no one that on this call, if I can help it, I mean, I would just say, negative people walk into your office, there's gossip, there's texts going back and forth, there's people making fun of partners, there's people critical of the firm. Anytime you're on that path, the law firm is going to, if you don't do it yourself, the law firm is going to extricate you, because that's how they survive. They need to have people around that are positive as opposed to negative. You would do the same thing if you were a firm. They need to push people like that out. Every employer does that, by the way. We go to work at a McDonald's and all you're doing is saying negative things about your manager and work and stuff, but you'll get fired from McDonald's, a minimum wage job. This is how it works in all employers. Maybe not if you're unionized or something, some big company, but I had an 18-year career in diplomacy. I was the lawyer that specialized in EU law and was posted as a diplomat at Brussels multiple times, worked on regulatory compliance matters in the European institutions that legislate. Since then, I passed the New York bar. I'm now looking for a law firm job in the US to work on regulatory compliance matters. I'm afraid to mention even that I have an 18-year career with a single employer. I'm trying just to emphasize the regulatory compliance experience. Is my instinct correct to avoid mentioning my background, or should I just owe it to my 8 years of work in my country's foreign ministry? Okay, well, I'm gonna give you an answer that you're not gonna like, but I'll just, spit it out because it's true, and I don't want you to waste too much time. So first of all, if you're an attorney with more than 10 years of experience trying to get a job in New York City, I don't care if you went to Harvard and you do commercial litigation, or for a top, Am Law 100 law firm, it doesn't really matter. Once you get more than 10 years of experience, the most important thing that be able to get a job is going to be, if you have business. So that doesn't mean you can't get a job, but it means you have business. And then, or if you don't have a business, that you're very, very specialized in some very niche practice area, like project finance for electric power plants in Asia. Like, you have to be like very specialized, where there's not a lot of people like you. You also have to be cognizant, if you're working in a large market, there's always going to be a lot of competition for these jobs. And so these jobs, there's going to be a lot of applicants. You need to be the best applicant. And there's very few senior level positions in most, in New York City, for one. I mean, it's just very difficult unless you don't have, just the bar exam's not enough. The second thing is, if you're a firm in New York City, where I'm assuming you want to work, you're going to be much more comfortable hiring somebody. If you can get past the experience issue, you're going to be much more comfortable. And this is valuable for everyone. So I just want to make sure you understand. You're going to be much more valuable, more interested in hiring somebody that's worked in a law firm, that's working for payer clients, paying law firm clients, that knows those kind of expectations and has worked in that field. So you're not going to want to hire people that are from different practice settings. You're not. So, your issues here are I hate to be so blunt, and it's not fun to hear this, but it's necessary. So many people, maybe tens of thousands of people, try to take the New York bar and work in New York City and stuff each year, and most of them don't have any success whatsoever. I remember when I was in my first job, there was a girl that was hired as a associate in my law firm from the Harvard LLM program, and there were like 500 people in there. And this is back in the mid 1990s, but she was the only person on the entire LLM program that had come to Harvard and got an LLM there that was hired in a law firm. I mean, this is how difficult it is. Now, I think it's easier now, but if you're senior with 10 years of experience, this is so everyone's, it's in a law firm, extremely difficult, like extremely, so difficult. If you are, someone with no experience in a practice setting, meaning practice setting, it's, next to impossible. So why? Because the law firms hire people from law firms. They don't hire people that are not from law firms. Now, you could be like maybe a U.S. attorney, get a job as a criminal defense attorney, white collar, maybe in a law firm, but you probably would have had law firms experience before that. So law firms hire people from law firms. They don't hire people from other practice settings, regardless. Regardless. I mean, why would they? They hire people that are trained to work in law firms. And even more, what, like regulatory work in Europe, I mean, how does that, maybe there's some regulatory work at law firms, but regulatory work in Europe, like, how does that, what sort of law firm, would need that? And then not only that, but, why would, why not just hire someone already in a law firm? So people don't learn this stuff. So you're very smart learning this stuff right now because it can help you, in a law firm already. So that's that's another big thing. So there may be law firms that need European regulatory work, and you may be able to find some of those law firms, but they're not going to want to hire someone more than 10 years of experience almost all the time. They're not going to want to hire someone that's not coming from that practice setting. But even more extreme, is, more extreme is from, why from another country? From another country. I mean, that's insane. Like, it's, different legal system. And then not only that, but it's in addition to a different legal system, there's all sorts of, visa requirements, visa, visa requirements and so forth for hiring you. So, why bother when they can hire someone, from the US? So these are all issues that people don't understand, that are, about getting a job. So getting a job as a senior attorney is incredibly difficult. Getting a job without experience in the practice setting is almost impossible. If you're trying to work in a large firm or in a large market, getting a position from a practice setting in a different country is even more extreme. Like, what? So, and never having, being from another country in general is even more extreme. So there are very few, I mean, there are attorneys working in law firms in New York from other countries. It's just, absolutely. But did they get jobs when they were senior? Did they get jobs when they had experience in another practice setting? And the answer is almost no. So, you can't, all these things hurt you. Now, what would you do? You would probably search for firms that have European, I mean, the way I would do it, let me just see here, I'll just show you the law firms. Okay, so here's what I just did, which is kind of interesting. I did a search for, I'll just show you real briefly, for law firms with European regulatory experience in New York City. So you can see here that there are certainly firms that do it. These are all major US law firms that would be very difficult to get a position in. But here's one that's interesting, Loyens and Loth. That's pretty interesting. I've never even heard of this firm. Looks like it's not a big, huge law firm. And these people actually are not in the US. Like, are there any here? No, there's not even a single attorney in the US. But this is the kind of search that I would do. I would look for law firms that may do it. These major law firms, Duane Morris, Covington, and all these huge law firms are going to be, next to impossible. Just give me 1 second, Fred. Sorry, I apologize. So these huge law firms are going to be next to impossible to get a position in, but maybe there's some of these smaller firms that are listed here where, would, be able to have a practice area, but you need to find law firms that have that practice area. So another cool thing you can do also is you could go to, this is the Big Law Breakthrough course, by the way, if you want to go there. There's talk a lot about how to get a position, but you could go to like ChatGPT, let's see, chat, and you could just say, what are law firms boutique smaller than, and this is how everyone, can search for positions smaller than. So you could just, or, European regulatory background. So anytime someone, you're thinking about picking up your life and taking the bar and moving to New York, you probably should understand, is there even a market for what I do? And let's just see real quick. So this is not the best search you could do. You would probably want to do a better prompt, but anytime someone's looking for a job in a practice area, you may want to see what's available. Because maybe there's firms that could use someone with your expertise, but even with that expertise, you're not necessarily, you're not necessarily practicing law in a way a law firm would do. So let's just see what happens here. I don't know what the search takes so long, but that's good. And then, I don't even know what GDPR boutiques is. This is incredible, the search. It's much better than Google. So sorry, everyone that's waiting for this, but it should show you, the power of this tool. Like, you're looking for jobs, this can be a way that you would be able to focus yourself. So if you're taking the New York bar and, you want to find a firm that does that, you're probably going to have to find a firm that already does European regulatory work. And then the firms that do European regulatory work, you would want to approach in terms of how you could help them. But like I said, being senior is difficult, not being that. So this is the first presence, first thing that that did it. So this is actually very useful. So these would be firms that do that, which is interesting because it's a fairly, comprehensive list of these firms. So you would, I don't, Zillow Glenn is kind of a larger firm, but these would be firms that you would approach, and then it says even here, it could expand the list to 20 names. So the point is there is hope, and these are firms that do it. You would have to figure out, how can you help them with what you know, and that would be your challenge. And so, but most of and then you could expand lists. So this is very interesting, all the places that you could do it with. And if you're able to do that, you're gonna, you do have some hope of getting a position, but it's extremely difficult from like I said. Okay, so and that's a great question. There's a lot of depth to that. Yeah. And these are great questions, but I hope you can see that, the pinning your hopes on something like this, you should always be aware of what the opportunities are and the risk. Okay, what is the best way to leverage a JD and an alternative legal career such as compliance? I have been practicing for 19 years. Most of my experience has been in family law, but I have in-house experience as a director of a non-profit law firm. So if you're 20 years out and you decide you want to do something different, I guess that's possible, like I said earlier. But if you have family law experience, like that's family law, it's not compliance. If you have, in-house experience, is that compliance? I guess, in-house is the executive director of a nonprofit law firm. So, if none of your experience is related to that, like in your 20 years out, in your mid-40s, older, like why would a law firm be interested in someone that's going to transition into another practice area? So I think it would be very, very difficult for you to do that in a law firm, but you certainly could apply to in-house companies and maybe do that. But what I guess my question would be, why would you want to do a completely different practice area? At some point, you're going to need to, buckle down and do something that is related to something that, that's consistent. So, starting a new practice here after 20 years is very, very difficult. You certainly wouldn't be able to do it, I don't think, with a law firm, but maybe you could do it if you could get the experience inside of a company that's willing to hire you, as a client's attorney. I don't, but this is a good question because like the problem is like there's all these attorneys that are in law firms that want to do different things. A lot of them are going to be younger than you, and maybe they have experience that's more relevant, like some sort of corporate law or something. So, and being an executive director of a nonprofit law firm is not practicing law. So how do you go into a different practice area? And people want to do this all the time. Like they think, oh, I can go to school and get a degree or something. But it's just very difficult for anybody to switch practice areas. Let me give you an example, just so you understand how difficult this is. So if you had gone to Harvard Law School and you're at the very top of your class and you spent the last 20 years as a associate at one of the top 10 largest law firms, most prestigious in the country, and then you made partner at that law firm and you've been a partner there for 9 years at one of the most prestigious law firms in the country, and you decide you want to switch from litigation to corporate, no one's going to be interested in you. You decide that you want to go in-house and do compliance, and you're a litigator, no one's probably going to be interested in you. So everyone hires people based on what their experience is. It's a sad thing to say, because what happens is a lot of times attorneys will be in law school and they'll get a summer job, and the job may be in corporate that they're hired for, and they may not be interested in corporate, but suddenly they're 5 years out and that's all they have. So, your current practice area is going to make it, it's going to be where you're most likely to get hired. And if you don't have that experience, sometimes as a fluke, if you applied enough in-house jobs, you might be able to get one, especially in a location where other people aren't applying. But, it's a very tough thing to do. It'd be tough even if you had a perfect pedigree. Like if you were 5 years out of law school and you'd only been at one firm, but doing something different, it would be tough. So the practice area selections you make and the path you take with your career early on is going to make a big difference. Okay, let's see, next question. I do motion practice litigator for the city of New York in Article 78. Where would I fit in? My background includes policy work with nonprofit, former international attorney with the World Intellectual Property Office of the UN. So let me just see what Article 78 is. I have no idea what that is. We have Article 78. So I'm just reviewing this real quickly. A thing is to challenge action or inaction by an agency of New York. Well, I don't know that being an Article 78 attorney is gonna, really translate necessarily into many practice areas, except maybe, suing people, that doesn't really translate. So your question is, what could you do with this sort of experience? So I see you do motion practice litigation. So, there's definitely, if you have some sort of litigation experience, there's definitely going to be places where you could potentially get a job. I don't know how long you've been doing it. But, this certainly may translate into some sort of, law firms that do Article 78. Let me just see here. So I would, one of the things that's kind of fun to do is always to review, to look at, how would you find law firms that do what you do? So let's see, law firms, just share my screen again. So anybody that has any type of, skill on things, it's law firms that do Article 70 decisions. So are there law firms that do that? So I should have done a ChatGPT. I should have also, oh, here we go. Labor law firm, Cello. Yeah, so there's all these different places that you could apply to that do these Article 78 proceedings, and maybe they would have an interest in you because of that. I don't know. There's probably even more than, it says clarify your situation. Are you challenging licensing? So this is what I would do. So you actually do have marketable skills. You could try to apply to these firms and show some interest in doing it. I would send my resume to people in them that do these Article 78 proceedings. And if you did that, that would actually be very helpful. And so you do. So the first thing is I would find the firms that do that, and that's how you would fit in. I don't like this policy background work and stuff with the intellectual property of, I would just, if I were you, I would just say you worked at these places and not even talk about your experience. But I would apply to firms that do Article 78 work in New York. That's what I would do. And I would de-emphasize all this different type of work you've done. If you don't want to work in a law firm, then you have to go and find more of these, nonprofit NGOs and that sort of thing to work at. But that's how I would approach my search. I wouldn't, but I would apply to all the firms you can find that do Article 78 work, which it seems like there's quite a few. So that's interesting. The other thing to keep in mind too, this is for all litigators, is anybody with a bar, there's always firms you could work at that, are going to be very small, but or in these practice areas that a lot of people don't want to do, like workers' comp and all these sorts of things where they're almost just kind of looking for bodies. And I was talking to a woman the other day, and she was able to get an offer, even though she had only worked as a solo practitioner, was not getting a PhD in something, related to the law. She was able to get an offer from a workers' comp firm. So, that's just a firm that's looking for bodies, but you can always get a job in a law firm for the most part. It's just that the question is it something, that you want to do? Okay, let's see, next question. But yeah, I'm encouraged by both of these attorneys that we talked about. I'm encouraged by, this person that, from the EU and the fact that there's firms. I'm also encouraged by, a person that has the Article 78 experience. Okay, you mentioned that bankruptcy and restructuring is an area that is in demand now. Are firms seeking to hire laterals in this area, looking for people with a book of business? It's certainly a book of business, less relevant. Bankruptcy is, fluctuates in terms of the demand. So, you because it's such a specialized practice area, meaning it's very niche. There are a lot of law firms, even major law firms with branch offices and things that might have like, one bankruptcy attorney sitting there without a lot of business that they keep there in case there's local work and stuff and things pick up. But, bankruptcy is a practice area. There's different levels of bankruptcy. There's restructuring, there's flat out bankruptcy, there's consumer bankruptcy, there's corporate bankruptcy. Someone in bankruptcy can always get a job in consumer bankruptcy, which doesn't pay a lot. But yeah, there's firms that have laterals, and bankruptcy is a practice area because it's so specialized and there's not a lot of bankruptcy attorneys. There's always firms that will hire people without a book of business. The interesting thing about bankruptcy is that, you should be actually aware of all this. So if you're a bankruptcy attorney, the bankruptcy bar is so small, like all the bankruptcy attorneys in a lot of cities know each other and they're all kind of connected, share jobs. So I don't make a lot of bankruptcy placements because the bankruptcy attorneys kind of all help each other out. When there's work someplace, they tell each other and that sort of. So, but yes, there are firms that hire laterals without a book of business. It's one of the few practice areas you can do that with. Bankruptcies, usually spin off from the law firm will have corporate clients that are filing bankruptcy. And then they give it to the in-house bankruptcy attorneys. Bankruptcy attorneys that get business usually are really out there, branding themselves and things, but how much business is necessary? I mean, it depends on if you're trying to get a job as a partner with business, it's going to depend on the size firm and, the market you're in. So if you're in a major market, it could be, 1 million to 3 million. If you're in a smaller market, it could be 500,000. It just depends. But yeah, bankruptcy is a good practice area. If you're looking for a job in bankruptcy, it's also a federal practice area, assuming you do federal bankruptcies. And so you can pretty much, once you get experience, you can apply to jobs in all these different states, assuming you can just waive in the bar. So it's a good practice area because it's a federal practice area, and there's that. Let me just see here. This person says, this is from the gossip. Let me be clear, I'm not a part of the gossip, and because I refuse to engage with attorneys and staff, I'm iced out. How do you juggle this? How do I maneuver the toxic culture? Well, you try to get close to partners that have business and work. So if you are close to them, the people that are giving you the work are the only ones you need to be concerned about. So if they're, maybe the entire firm is toxic, which sometimes happens, and those firms explode. There are a lot of very toxic firms. One of the biggest examples is like sometimes two firms will merge, then all the partners on both sides, half of the firm will hate one half of the firm, and it's just gonna be an awful place to work. But in general, how do you just get close to people that have work, and then you ignore the rest of the people, and then you become even a confidant to the partners with work, and you explain to them, you don't want to participate in this, but there's a lot of negative stuff and make them trust you. But the only people that matter in a firm are not your fellow attorneys. The people that matter are the clients that the partners that are giving you business. I will try to. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay. So that's a good question. Give me for a second there. Someone just says, I got dragged into toxicity. How do I get out of it? You just don't talk to people like that anymore. That's, just something to avoid. Let me just see here. Someone asks, do I offer a career consultation? Yeah, people ask about this on most of the calls. So I can try to put a link to it on the next call. People seem to ask about it every call, and I don't. Again, like all this stuff, like this big law breakthrough and the career consultations, I really don't get out there and sell it and advertise it, but I can, post it later, I guess. Okay, so next question. How do inconsistent summer job choices affect my future career? Well, if you don't work in a law firm during your summers, it's going to be difficult for you to get a job in a law firm when you graduate. It doesn't mean you can't get a job in a law firm. There are always firms that will hire you and insurance defense and workers' compensation and all these different types of things. But immigration, maybe personal injury. But if you want to work in a law firm that represents companies, like tend to have a lot more revenue, and the practice areas and stuff you work in tend to be more advanced than, meaning, be commercial litigation representing companies as opposed to personal injury or insurance defense representing essentially injured people. The more consequential work you want to do, the more important it is to work, in a major practice area, if that makes sense. If you want to work in a job representing companies as opposed to individuals, you typically need to work in a law firm during the summer. That's it. Why would you want to work in a law firm that represents companies as opposed to individuals? Those companies have larger budgets, they can pay people more. The work is more sophisticated because companies can hire anyone. So, companies can write checks for legal services, that are almost unlimited depending on the size. That's what a big law firm does. Big law firm has, clients that write to send bills to their clients for hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars per month. And those clients will pay. Whereas a smaller firm, you might struggle to get, 5,000 out of a client. Or an insurance defense firm, you might bill out at like $100 an hour. It's crazy. What are the ethical considerations for attorneys using AI tools in their practice? Every attorney should use AI tools in their practice. You should use it to check if you might miss things in transactions, to compare, to come up with arguments and things that you need to include in briefs or to proofread things. Everybody should be using AI. I don't know why you would be crazy not to. And there's nothing, why would it be unethical to have help with your assignments and do a better job? How can law firms avoid making hire decisions that lead to poor long-term performance or cultural misalignment? So there's, if you're a law firm, I mean, most law firms in the country receive, that doesn't mean they read them. This is for everyone to understand. Okay, so for cultural misalignment, the biggest thing is like if your attorneys interview the person, do they like them? So that's kind of the most important. These are the 5 things that I do presentations on law firms all the time for how to hire. Does a person really want the job? So if people want the job, they'll have very good reasons for wanting to work there specifically. So that will come across. And then usually, can they do the job? You can pick that up from the resume, meaning, do they have experience in your practice area, but also are they willing to work the hours and things you need? And then being able to be managed is a big one. So is the attorney gonna work in the office if they need to? Is the attorney gonna, behave is that attorney gonna follow directions, do things the way you want to? And then the other is, will they do the job long term, meaning will they stick around? So, and you can usually tell that based on previous moves. So these are all the big questions. Can you do the job, which means can you do the job in the way we want? Meaning, will the person work the hours? Do they have the experience? Does it look like they're a talent for to do the job? Can they be managed? Meaning, do they look like someone that will do what you ask of them and won't question it, and will be an employee as opposed to being, someone that just does things the way they want? Will the person commit? So committing means, will they come up against adversity and will they continue to do the job, even if that happens? And typically you can tell by their moves or why they're moving and things when you ask them that, if they're going to stick around. Can you do the job, or do you want the job? Just means, does the person really seem to want this job? I mean, are they enthusiastic about it? If they really want it, do they come across and do we believe them? And then the biggest one, I think, from a cultural alignment is, do people like them? You don't know why you don't like people. I mean, what happens typically, it was funny, I was talking to a woman about going out on a date, and I said to her something along the lines of, well, that's what I said. I said, there's a 30% chance, when you meet people for a date that you'll like them. There's another 30% chance you'll just kind of feel ambivalent about them. And there's another 30% chance that you won't like them. Now, maybe it's a little higher when you're meeting people for dates because you've already kind of pre-qualified each other by kind of dating sites, seeing this picture you liked or whatever in bio. But for the most part, when people meet each other, the odds are, there's all these psychological studies on it, that 30% of the people you meet you'll actually like and want to be friends with, and the other 30% you won't care one way or another, and other 30% you just won't like. So when you're hiring people or when you're going to work someplace, you want that 30% to be more almost all towards liking. And so a lot of times people interview someone, they'll just kind of won't care one way or the other, or they won't like them. So when you're interviewing and hiring people, you want to hire people, that you like. And let me just give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay. Okay, next question. I'm just trying to find. Okay, so this person asks, how can I recover my legal career after being laid off from a law firm? So if you're laid off and you're not working, you just need to apply to enough places. So people make the mistake when they're laid off of only applying to law firms that have openings. If a law firm has an opening, then the law firm is going to be more likely to hire people that are currently employed, because you would too, rather than people that aren't working. So you certainly can apply to those jobs, and everything is about the law of supply and demand. So if you're applying to those jobs in a large market, there's probably going to be a lot of other people applying for them. So it's going to be harder for you to get a job. If you apply to smaller firms that aren't getting a lot of applications, then you'll have a better chance. If you're applying to firms in markets where there's not a lot of applications, you'll have a better chance. But when I work with people, I generally try to make sure that they're applying to a decent number of places. Like, you don't get a job typically by only applying to law firms that have openings. So most jobs are filled that we fill at least are, firms that don't have openings. So if we send someone to firms without openings, then there's just not a lot of competition. And so if there's not a lot of competition, you're the only applicant, you're much more likely to get a job. So you should be applying to as many places as you possibly can, and firms that don't have openings. You have to research in your market all the firms that are in your practice area and send applications for them. If you do that, I mean, typically in most markets, I mean, there's 100 or if not more law firms in your practice area. Maybe there's 30, but then if you look at other cities, then there's suddenly 100. I mean, you need to apply to as many firms. And then when you get to your new firm, you just need to stick it out and do the best you possibly can. See, I'm just looking for what are the best ways to network as a junior attorney. So to network as a junior attorney to land better opportunities, it's typically you want to get involved in bar associations. You want to be very nice to the people that you're working with because they may go to other firms where you could potentially work. You want to, associations and things like that are always a good idea because especially related to your practice area, but even your city, meeting other attorneys there and making them like you and so forth. And just that way is a very good way to find a position. So it's also true that something to think about. I mean, now you have job sites and you have all these different ways on LinkedIn and all these different ways of finding jobs. But prior to that, most positions, and I don't know what it is now, but the vast majority of positions, like 80% or something, were filled based on informal contacts with people. And it used to be that with meeting the opposite sex, like almost everything was done through informal networking and meeting people in bars or whatever. And now I think a lot of people are dating sites and so, but most of the time you're going to get things through informal networking. So if you want to meet a significant other and you're not in a dating sites, you will go out and put yourself in a position either with friend groups or different places you go to meet people, whether it's bars or social organizations, where you play Scrabble, who knows? But that's how you meet the opposite sex. And so it's or the same sex, whatever you're interested in. But that's how people traditionally have met people. And so, it's the same thing with attorneys. Like you're not going to you can meet other attorneys by putting yourself in that situation. And it's also the same thing that people do to meet clients. They just get out and they just be seen. So you need to be seen by people and that work that way. And that's it. So you can do it with more senior attorneys. You can do it with all sorts of things. Another question from a law firm. What are the most common red flags that law firms should watch for when reviewing attorney resumes? The most common red flags are unemployment, multiple jobs in a short period of time, often short period of time, lack of focus. So unemployment, that's a red flag because it could mean that the person quit or was let go. That is a bad sign. So you typically would want someone that is employed. There's certainly reasons for asking the person why they're unemployed. And it could not reflect on their background, but typically it's easier to hire people that are employed. People that have had multiple jobs in a short period of time, why would you hire someone like that? If you hire someone like that, the odds are that they're going to leave. So why would you introduce them to your clients and have them work on your matters and spend time hiring them when you can hire someone that has stability and isn't likely to leave? People that have a lot of short-term jobs typically have short-term jobs because they didn't do a good job or they don't get along with people or they whatever, or they just decide to leave or whatever. So that's a big one. Lack of focus on a resume. So if someone has worked in multiple practice areas and is never focused and doesn't seem like they're going to commit to a practice area or whatever, that means, why would you hire a fifth-year attorney that's worked in 5 different practice areas, so essentially has 1 year of experience in your practice area and doesn't have the training and focus? So those are some of the big ones. Let me see if I can come up with any other ones. People that can't be managed, I guess you can't tell that from the resume. People doing the job long-term, you can tell that, wanting a job. So those are kind of the big ones: unemployment, multiple jobs, and that. Okay, first question. How do I build a personal brand as an attorney to attract high-value clients? So you develop a personal brand by the best way is usually to do a couple things. One would be to start developing an expertise in your practice area. And that means, writing, speaking, building up your resume in terms of things you do, going out and, talking to people potential attorneys in your practice area, getting involved in groups and volunteering things. So people get on boards of hospitals, they participate in, things where they're going to meet other wealthy people. So being in a board of a hospital could bring a hospital as a client, being, involved in different networking groups for attorneys that, all those sorts of things. So, you build a personal brand by getting out there and just looking like you're really, really good in your practice area. So you build up your bio, you look like the best choice of someone, you have a lot of enthusiasm for the subject matter. So an example would be like somebody that's a privacy law attorney. Maybe they just everything that they read about privacy law, they just develop like a huge, you know, repository of information. They print things up, they write papers, they write short articles for newspapers and things, and they build something up on that. So typically your personal brand is going to be related to your practice area, becoming like an expert in that, and then having a lot of enthusiasm for it. All right, well, I think that's all the questions. Thanks everyone for being on the webinar and learning all this stuff. I think, this was a lot of hard information to hear, but it's very helpful. Every time you learn this stuff, it can make a huge difference in your career. I was impressed with the person that, said they took my course and they gotten, done very, very well. Certainly you can take a course like this, but you also just watching these webinars is incredibly valuable for your career. Oftentimes, just being on one of them will teach you lessons that, you never got from law school or anything like that. And, or you haven't learned, 5 years into your career and can make a difference. And I only know this stuff because I've been, sitting here for a quarter century, looking at resumes all day and, running a recruiting firm. So I hope this is helpful, and I will talk to everyone next week.